Testing 1, 2, 3. Good morning and welcome to the Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee meeting of December the 5th. I will begin by asking, are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, confirmation of minutes 38 meeting of the 7th of November 2013 of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. That carried. I'll just read the statement required to be read at the beginning of each meeting. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 6 and 7 on today's agenda. For the items listed above, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt an amendment within 120 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 180 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments on these amendments. So with that, we'll go through the agenda. Item number 1, the addition of 5514 Manotick Main Street to the City of Ottawa Heritage Registry. Carried. Item number 2, appointments to the South Nation Conservation Authority. Carried. Item number 3, appointment to the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. We have a technical amendment, so I'll ask Vice Chair Councillor Blais.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Technical amendment that recommendation 2 of the appointment to the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority be replaced with the following: reconfirm the appointment of Councillor Scott Moffat and David Chernyshenko as council representatives.
Is that carried? Item number appointments to the I thought you'd like that one. Appointments to the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. Is that carried? Item number 5, quarterly performance report to Council, Q3, July 1st, September 30th, 2013. Is that carried? Item number 6, zoning, 190 David Manchester Road. That will be held. We have speakers on that. Item number 7, zoning, 1565 Phelan Road. Is that carried? Now we have one additional item, support for feed-in tariff program application for on-farm biogas projects. So we have to suspend the rules, so the rules suspended so we can deal with that motion. Okay. So Councillor Vice Chair Blais.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Therefore, be resolved that the Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve the individual motion of support for the application of an on-farm biogas project for the FIT 3.0 program listed as Appendix A, which is attached. Okay,
and I want to thank Mr. Moody for being considered and bringing this forward. It is for a project on in-Osgood Ward, so perhaps Mr. Moody, you might want to brief us on that.
Mr. Chair, it's just come to my attention that there may be an additional site to add to this motion as well before it goes to committee and council. Just wondering if it might indulge the chair to deal with that at the end of the meeting as opposed to immediately through the bulk consent.
Mr. Moody, anything you ask, we grant. So, yes, we'll just hold that and consider that at the end of the meeting. Okay, so with that, we will go back to item number 6, the zoning, 190 David Manchester Road, West Carleton item, and we will have an update from staff. So welcome.
Good. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee, and members of the audience. My name is Laurel McCrate, and I'm the file lead on the zoning bylaw amendment application for 190 David Manchester Road. To give you a brief outline of today's presentation, I'll begin with the site context, moving on to the purpose of the application, going through the policy framework, the provincial policy statement, and the official plan, a summary of my presentation, a recommendation to the committee, as well as a question period for any questions you may have. Context of the application: the site is located on the east side of David Manchester Road, just west of Highway 7. The site is approximately 6.4 hectares in size. It's currently vacant and partially forested. The surrounding uses that we can see on the next slide include a quarry just to the right, rural residential uses in this site, as well as vacant forested land. The purpose of the application is to rezone the lands from rural countryside to rural general industrial to permit the construction of a 3,600 square meter heavy equipment and vehicle sales, rental and servicing facility with accessory retail and office space. The zoning application is also tied to a proposed site plan, so I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the proposed site plan where it stands today. We are still currently working with the applicant on issues related to the site plan. So this is the proposed facility here, located just to, we'll say to the east right now is the existing toy store. Highway 7 abuts the property, as well as David Manchester. There's associated parking and some outdoor storage related to the site plan. To go through the policy framework, I'll begin with the provincial policy statement. The Planning Act states that matters must be consistent with the provincial policy statement. I have set out some policies that are relevant to this application, for them on the slide that you see before you, to talk about how the application does not meet these policies. Firstly, the introduction of an industrial and retail use in this location constitutes inefficient scattered development. There's already an existing supply of vacant industrial land in both the urban and rural areas to support the proposed use. And the environmental impact statement prepared in support of the proposed rezoning and site plan does not adequately ensure protection of environmental features and functions on the site as well as adjacent to the site. The city's official plan designates the property both rural natural features and general rural. So you can see here where the site is located in proximity to a mineral designation for the quarry just to the east. Rural natural features and provincially significant wetlands surround the property, as well as general rural uses. The intent of the rural natural features designation is to protect natural areas in the rural area that contain significant woodlands, wetlands, and wildlife habitat. The intent of the general rural designation is to accommodate a variety of land uses that are appropriate for a rural location. The general rural area designation requires that any applicant applying for a zoning bylaw amendment has to meet several policies set out in this designation. It must demonstrate why the proposed use is not better located in another designation and how the use is in keeping with the rural area. These are some of the policies that are set out in the general rural area that the application must meet and that staff are satisfied that the proposed use will satisfy. Again, the proposed use is not exclusively related to the rural economy and does not by its nature need to locate in the rural area. The retail function and its associated traffic is incompatible in a rural residential setting. An industrial and retail use of this magnitude is not suitable in this part of the general rural area and would negatively impact adjacent rural landowners on David Manchester Road. One other commercial use is located in close proximity to the site, as I have showed on an aerial photo. The remaining and the surrounding area is scattered rural residential uses just along David Manchester Road. supporting another development along this road would be considered scattered development. This is two views, or these are two views of David Manchester Road. The top left one is looking north from the site, that would be on the right, to up David Manchester Road. As you can see, the road is partially paved and it ends just up here. The rest of the road is a gravel road, and further up the road are rural residential uses. If we look south over here, starting at where the gravel ends and the pavement begins just below the picture, you can still see it's relatively rural in nature and partially forested. The City of Ottawa did an employment land study, and this is the 2012 update. As you can see in the chart on the left, it shows vacant employment land in the rural and urban area, so 44% is vacant in the rural area and 56% is vacant in the urban area. And just the note, it says it includes existing industrial and business parks. Another statistic that came from the study on the right-hand side is there is a 36-year supply of vacant lands in the urban areas of the city and 100 years in the rural portions of the city. This would lead us to believe that rezoning a site for an industrial and retail use that is not permitted for is not considered good planning. To summarize the presentation, an industrial and retail use is not appropriate for this property. It would be better suited in the urban area or an existing rural industrial area. The proposed development exceeds the type and extent of commercial development for the rural area. It also would be considered scattered development if approved and will ultimately lead to strip development. Therefore, the department's recommendation to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee is that we recommend refusal of the application to amend the zoning bylaw for 190 David Manchester to permit a heavy equipment and vehicle sales, rental, and servicing facility. We would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Laurel, for that presentation. Much appreciated. Very professional. I have a couple of questions, but we do have speakers, so I think we will hear the speakers and then we'll have questions. So we have Janet Bradley and her group. And Ms. Bradley, what we have worked out with you is that we'll give you 10 minutes for your group.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Janet Bradley, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the owner. And beside me is Bridget Alchala, a planner from McIntosh Perry. We have in the room Elizabeth or Heather Lynn, who is the person who prepared the economic impact statement. So if the committee has any questions of her, she's available for questions. And after we're finished, we have two representatives from John Deere and Nortrax who have proposed the proposed development, and they're here. They can make a submission if you'd like to hear it, but they're also here to answer any questions that the committee might have of them with respect to what their plans are and why this is a perfect site for them. So my intention is now to just do a little overview and then to turn it over to Ms. Alchala, who will provide a more detailed planning synopsis. So in a nutshell, this property is a very unique and unusual. It's called isolated even by the planning staff because it's surrounded by a Trans-Canada Highway, Highway 7, that's now 4 lanes and completely divided. It's got a major hydro corridor that goes through one side of it, and it's got David Manchester Road. It has very little vegetation on it. It has some scrub forestry, but not much. Most of it is just open space. It's vacant, as I've said. You've seen the pictures. It's surrounded by quarries. It's got Capital City Speedway. It's got some scrap yards. And it's one of those sites that we often have, which there's virtually not much you can do with it. But what does it have? What makes this site so unique and significant is that it is on this major highway. It is very close to an intersection with this highway. And it its location puts it very close to where 416 and 417 can be readily accessed. So from the city's point of view in economic development, this is a very important site, notwithstanding what you've heard from the planning department. And it's important to companies like John Deere, big international companies who are looking for sites such as this. And why they want a site such as this company, they're not going to manufacture here. They're going to sell and distribute fairly heavy equipment, and it has to be brought in big flatbed trucks. And from this site, they're going to have a sales center and a service center and a distribution center for a good part of eastern Ontario and western Quebec. They need to be beside a kind of highway like this, and they would like to be in the Ottawa area. They don't have to be in Ottawa because, as I say, they're selling to eastern Ontario and western Quebec. But you'll hear from them. They think this site is perfect for them. So we have a use that's perfect for the site. We have a site that's perfect for the use. And I know you're all thinking, what then really is the planning issue? Like, why is your planning staff recommending to you that it not be approved? And what I submit to you on that is you have this area that's designated in your official plan as rural natural features because there are many in the greater area. But this particular site doesn't have any natural features. So it's got a designation for which it has no attributes that respond to the feature. And it's zoned rural, and most of the uses that one can put in the rural area you can't put on this site because you can't farm it. It's basically rock. It's got it does very poor trees. You couldn't do any forestry operation. You can't even put a house on it because of its proximity to the quarries that are in the area. So there's almost no use in the rural area. So you've got land that happens to be designated and zoned, I'm going to submit, inappropriately given this particular site. And that often happens when you're doing official plans of a broad nature and you're doing comprehensive zoning bylaws. And so the good news for all of us on this side of the table, and the good news for Ottawa, is that your rural natural features designation does permit a use like this. So it's not a situation where it's a prohibited use, it's actually a permitted use in your official plan, but it requires that in order for it to be considered as a use, you have to go through an analysis of whether there could be any impact, and that includes whether there could be impact on the natural features, and there are none, whether there could be impact on traffic, and the studies have said no, whether there could be impact on anyone who lives in the area, and you can see nobody's here, and there's nobody really that close to the site, whether it's compatible with the surrounding area, and you've heard about the quarries and the scrap yards and the speedway. And one of the more important issues, and that goes to your big plan there, like a 100-year supply. I'm sure you're all thinking, really? This site is 16 acres and very close, as I've indicated, to this access. And it's not the kind of site that, or use that you'd want in your villages or you'd want in many parts of your area. It's a good use for this particular site. And so all of those check boxes, are we going to impact anything of significance, have been studied, and they all have been demonstrated that there's going to be no impact from this particular type of use, and it's a good use in the rural economy because it does have big equipment that actually can be used not only for forestry and construction, but also for big agricultural purposes. And so my overview and my submissions are, we have a proposal and we have a site. The use complies with the designation in the official plan. It's very good for Ottawa's economy, and my submission is that it complies with your official plan, and it does represent good planning for that reason. I'm going to turn it over now to Ms. Alchala, who can provide more detail.
Thank you, Janice.
Yeah.
So I'll just provide a little bit more information. Some of the beginning of mine is very similar to Laurel's with the purpose of the application, so I'll go through that a little bit quicker. But this just shows where the site is, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about what some of the uses are that exist in the area. This just shows some of the zoning that's in the area. You can see that around it there is some RU, but there is the RG immediately to the south. There's the MR, and there's some RG1 also in the area. So what we've done is we've taken the issues that were identified by staff, and I just want to briefly go over how they were addressed. And so one of the biggest ones was for the rural natural features area, and as Janet noted, development is permitted there unless it's demonstrated that same would result in a negative impact. But we did do a comprehensive environmental impact statement. We pre-consulted with the City of Ottawa, the Conservation Authority, and MNR. A number of site visits were done for terrestrial field visits as well as targeted species at risk surveys. They were done throughout the summer. Nothing was found on the site. It's acknowledged even by city staff that there is pre-existing fragmentation on the site given the hydro corridor, the locations of the two roads that we're bound by, and as well the EIS concludes that there was no significant woodlands present given all of these features. And so we do have an EIS that demonstrates that there won't be any major impacts, which is one of the major requirements of developing in the rural natural features designation. And then you've seen this is our site plan. You can see that we've located the building in an area that's it has very limited vegetation on it now given the formation of the site and the rock on the site. So we've tried to locate things in a way that we're able to maintain much of the vegetation that is on site, and we've located where it's mostly, it's described as a cultural meadow. It's scrubby brush basically in the area for the most part. For the planning issues that were identified, staff have noted that it's not related to the rural economy, and what Nortrax does is they supply and service equipment for various rural sectors, some of the largest including large-scale agriculture, forestry, aggregate resource management, and construction. All of these uses are located in the rural area. They have an important impact on the rural economy, and for this specific site, a lot of these uses are located in the immediate vicinity as well. It's been noted that the introduction of the industrial and retail use constitutes inefficient scattered development. However, this site will allow the development to utilize existing infrastructure, which includes the major interchange of the highways, and as well as I'll demonstrate further on, it's located in close proximity to a number of other commercial and industrial uses. And this site was actually selected after an extensive search that's taken about 3 years for them to find a site in the City of Ottawa. There was also the issue of traffic flow patterns brought up, and that the major concern was for retail, but the retail component of this use is actually quite small, and it largely takes place off-site in that the Nortrax salesmen travel to their clients to sell them the equipment. It's not so much that someone's coming into the facility on a regular basis to purchase. For the potential for negative impacts on adjacent landowners, the intent is to retain much of the existing vegetation that is in the area between any of the rural residential uses that are located to the north of the property. And as well,
you have about half a minute left, so
okay,
if you could speed up.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out some of the surrounding land uses. You have the Play Value Toys. You can see them here, the Capital City. There's an asphalt plant. There's another heavy equipment manufacturing. The metal scrapyard is directly across the highway. And if you move further to the north, you'll have the city's new snow storage. There's the waste management facility. There is an existing John Deere facility that fronts onto the highway, as well as earth movers. So there are a number of uses. And just to close, I just want to outline some of the economic benefits that will be here. There's a construction value of over $7 million. The development charges that will be payable to the city are over $550,000. They're anticipating 175 construction jobs. And by allowing this development in this location, Nortrax has currently outgrown their current spot in CARP, and by allowing them to go here, the city will be able to retain 35 permanent high-paying jobs, and there's an anticipated 8 to 12 in the near future with a significant payroll associated with that. And also, they do have a regional client base, so it will continue to bring people from outside the region into the city. And Nortrax has advised that while their clients are here, they're also visiting and frequenting other city establishments and bringing business as well there. And so this is just some of the elevations that you can see what we're proposing. It's a highly designed building, and we're hoping that we can provide a visually pleasing building that will improve the streetscape in the area.
Thanks very much for your speed at the end. We appreciate that, but I think both speakers have outlined very clearly what your position is, so appreciate that. Are there questions for yes,
if I may interrupt, and I apologize for that, but we do have two representatives from John Deere and Nortrax here who can speak to this. It's at the will of the committee if they would like to hear from them. They're both happy to speak. I'm sure there's none of the members on the committee that's never heard of John Deere, but anyway, they would be happy to discuss their proposal.
Thank you. I think you've made the position quite clear, and so I think any questions for the presenters? Councillor Deputy Mayor Al Chantieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both Janet and Bridget for not just for your presentation today, but also for providing the information prior to this meeting to my colleague on this committee. My advice, if it's possible for you to, after this meeting, to provide the same information to the rest of the council before the next council meeting, but don't send it too early, just a few days before council meeting. And my question, when you were showing Bridget the site on the landscape side of it, and if you go back to the landscape, and this one, I had, on my request, I met with the landowner, and I had asked him if it's possible to expand on the front of the Highway 17 and provide a larger trees, and they agreed to accept that. And I know this is not part of the zone today, but at least for the future, they have agreed to have the larger tree, so it still have a beautiful entrance to the city of Ottawa, and they agree to that as well.
Yeah, that's correct. We have submitted a landscape plan to the city, and we will be revising it after the outcome of those discussions, and we'll be basically putting in pits. Currently on the site, the reason there's a lack of vegetation is the rocks, and it doesn't support the trees, so we'll be putting in pits that can support the large tree plantings, both coniferous and deciduous, as asked for by staff.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, I have some questions for staff, but I let my colleague ask their question first, and I'll go after.
Okay. Any other questions for the presenters? I just had one, Ms. Bradley, and I don't think we need to bring the representatives from the company here, but this dealership would be basically a distribution center for Eastern Ontario.
The area in question goes from, I think I'm going to get this right, from Deep River to Cornwall.
Cornwall to Napanee to Deep River to Pontiac back.
Okay, so it's all the way to Napanee, and then it does Western Quebec up to the Pontiac as well. And so it's a sales center, so there will be some of the equipment that they sell will be on the site. It's a service center, so the equipment can be serviced there, and it also distributes throughout all of that part of Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec.
Okay, thanks very much. I think those are all the questions, so appreciate that, and we now have some questions for staff. So
Thank you.
thanks very much for your presentation. Okay, so questions for staff. Councillor Deputy Mayor Al Chantieri.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to staff, and I know we've been through, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation as well, and I understand where staff coming from on this file, because not too long ago, I think a couple of years ago, we had the same situation with the play value, and if you drive today, you see how beautiful that building is and how creating job in that area. And I know if you look across the street where it's allowed across the highway, you'll see the the tow business, and now they're stacking the buses 4 street high. So if I'm really concerned about the entrance or the gateway to the city, I will be happy to see what but my question to the planner, did you get any public inquiry or inquest on this application?
No, we did not receive any comments on the
Can you
application.
pull your mic a little bit closer, please?
No, we did not receive any comments regarding the application.
From the resident?
None.
And in the past, as you know, we have one resident who opposed the play value, and they asked for the traffic to be directed basically south, so they don't use David Manchester as a route for them, and we comply with that. Even we asked the trucks who've been there forever because of the quarry, we asked them to go south versus going north on the road, and they comply with that as well. Is that correct?
Correct. David Manchester is not a designated truck route, so a condition for the previous site is that the trucks have to, once they leave the site, directly head south on David Manchester back to Hazeldean and divert to wherever they're going. If this application is approved, a similar condition would be imposed on the site plan that they're to go no farther than the John Deere site and to reroute back to Hazeldean and Highway 7.
And have you heard any more concern from the same resident since the play value started the business? Okay.
Actually, I've heard from a different resident on the play value site for different reasons, but no, I haven't heard from this one in particular resident.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Debremiero Chantieri. Are there any other members of the committee that have questions? I just had a couple questions. I wonder if you could put up slide 10. Yeah, please. Sorry to put you through all this work, Laurel. Could you, that's it. So where would this site, you've shown the paved and the gravel. Where would this site be located, or where would this, yes. Can you show on,
So here we are looking north on David Manchester and how the paving ends here. John Deere would be along this side over here.
so they would be on the paved section?
Yes, and as part of the site plan, they will have to pave further north on David Manchester in order to accommodate their trucks.
Okay. Because that was, when I saw that was a concern, because I think with the heavy trucks coming in, you would not want them to be on gravel. Could you put up slide 11? And I know that this is always a debate that we have between staff and councillors when we look at those figures, rural employment land, the percentages. But one of the things that we have to take into account is that even though there is, I presume you're saying there's adequate employment lands some other place, but in the rural areas, sometimes it's very difficult to locate a business where city staff say it should be. So I know that when you give us those figures, that it doesn't look good if we're perhaps putting a business in another location other than one that you would approve. But we do have to be considerate of the fact that sometimes you have to locate for a business where it is feasible to be. And from the presentation that was made by the speakers, and yourself, I think, too, that this, if we were looking in a perfect world, this would be a perfect place to put this business because of its access to the major roads. So is that something that staff take into consideration, or do they, I mean, I know you have to follow the rules, but I'm trying to get you to agree with me, but
Never.
you're not going to.
Not with me,
Okay.
no.
But I think the Councillor Deputy Mayor El Chantier raised this when we were looking at the official plan, that sometimes the figures are questionable, and I think in cases like this, sometimes we have to look at where, in fact, might be the best place to site the location. So I appreciate your input, and your presentation was very professional. I'm not sure we agree. So on that, I don't have any other questions. Councillor Deputy Mayor El Chantier.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chair, thank you for those insight questions to staff, and I want to thank staff also. We might not agree, but I just want to say thank you for Laura and Mr. Moody for being available to answer any question we have about this site. And as we go through the report, Mr. Chair, in hindsight, yes, it's great to have it. But first of all, I want to say to John Deere, we're happy and grateful they choose our city to be in it, because we all know John Deere is a brand. You can, if you want it, you're going to go no matter where it's located. You're going to go for the location. But we're grateful to have them in our city, in our boundary. When we're talking about 15 acres of land, we all know that's not going to be possible to be by Bayshore or Canada Centrum. So we understand it has to be somewhere. And what better fit for John Deere business than a rural area to be in? And to create that kind of construction money and development charge and employment for that area, I cannot be more than happy to support this application. So, Mr. Chair and my colleague, I would ask you, I know the report you treat the Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend council refuse an amendment. I would like to switch the word from refuse to approve, and instead of having a motion, just changing the wording and okay.
We have a technical amendment to this. I'm going to ask Councillor Blais to move this technical amendment. But before we have Councillor Blais do that, I just want to echo the comments of Councillor Deputy Mayor El Chantier. I think that 10 or 15 years ago, the agricultural community was in a downturn. A lot of the businesses like this one we're talking about were closing down, and we know that. The farm implement dealerships were closing down. In the last 4 or 5 years, 7 or 8 years, we see a resurgence of this business grouping. And I know there's a John Deere dealership in Winchester. As a matter of fact, there are 3 farm implement dealerships side by side, John Deere, and I can't remember the other 2. So I think that we have to take a look at that. I think it's very important, as the Councillor Deputy Mayor El Chantier said, that it is important rural employment for the rural sector, and I think it bodes well that we have a business like this willing to set up shop in the city of Ottawa. We hear all the time that businesses are moving out because of high development charges and high taxes, but it's great to see someone moving in to the area to it would be part of the city and the rural economy, both for Ottawa and the outskirts of the city. So with that, I certainly would ask you to support this motion. So we have moved by Councillor Blais a technical amendment.
The document 1 location map be replaced with the attached document 1.
Okay. That the recommendation be amended to read approve and direct the. We have to read this motion first. Okay. So on the technical amendment. Carried. So, Mr. Mark.
Yes, Mr. Chair. For purposes of clarity, if the committee is going to approve the rezoning, it should be specified as to what it's going to be. And so my suggestion is it be that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to amend zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 190 David Manchester Road to RG to permit a heavy equipment and vehicle sales, rental, and servicing facility. I had a chance to speak to Mr. Moody, and he confirms that the site would then comply with RG. So change refuse to approve and insert the words to RG after David Manchester Road.
Okay. Okay, so on the motion that has been amended, is that carried? Carried. All right, thank you, Mr. Mark, for that. So appreciate your assistance. I want to move back now to, we had an additional item, the support.
Just make sure you carry the report as amended.
So, yes, just on item number 6, as the report is carried as amended. Carried. We had suspended the rules to deal with the support for feed-in tariff program application for on-farm biogas projects. Mr. Moody, would you be prepared just to give a brief what that means, because some people might not be sure.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. In the city, we have a number of large dairy farms, a small number, but there's more than 2 or 3 of large dairy farms that do have facilities on their site that capture the methane that is produced from the manure they produce as it decomposes. Some of these facilities have been in place now for a couple of years, and there are a number of benefits to that, and one of the chief benefits is that it really reduces the amount of odor that's produced from that manure as it decomposes. It's capturing all of that smelly stuff and burning it to produce electricity. The additional benefit is that there is a certain heat that the manure goes through, or that a certain temperature that the manure reaches that does kill any pathogens that may be in that manure as well. So there's some significant environmental benefits to this process, and we do have a couple of these facilities in the City of Ottawa. The 2 applications that are before you are applying to the FIT 3.0 program, and we've had a number of solar type projects come before this committee in the past. These are biogas projects, so they are different than solar, and what they're looking to do is expand their existing generating capacity. So they're not expanding the whole facility, it's expanding the generators, putting in a new motor to capture additional gas that's currently being flared off from those facilities in order to generate more electricity for the grid.
Okay, thank you for that. So we had a Councillor Vice Chair Blais earlier on prepared to move that motion, and we'd asked that I'll just read the section that is important. Therefore, be resolved that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve the individual motion of support for the application of on-farm biogas projects for the FIT 3.0 program as listed as appendices A and B attached. That's moved by Councillor Vice Chair Blais. So is that carried? Carried. Okay, thank you very much for that. Then moving on, are there any, there are no in-camera items, no speakers for the open mic session. We have not received any notices of motions. We'll move to the inquiry section, and I just had one, and I'd like to bring to the attention of perhaps Mr. Moody. There is an issue that has arisen in the rural areas, specifically in Osgoode Ward, but I think just pertains to the rural areas. A number of rural residents have a part-time job driving school buses, and the bylaw precludes buses from being parked in laneways in villages. And I guess that sort of has, over the past number of years, there have been no issues. there was a complaint received about a bus being parked in a driveway in a village in Osgood Ward, and so bylaw had to react to that. And the issue here is that this could snowball because, and I had a call from Stock Transportation, a number of their employees park their buses at home. It would be a dreadful situation if, in fact, this process was not being allowed. So I'm just wondering, Mr. Moody, if you could work with your staff and bylaw to see if there's some way of working around this or revisiting that bylaw, because it is a really serious issue that is just coming to my attention, and probably will come to other people's attention, because there are a whole host of people who work part-time. The companies can't have these people come to the yard to pick up their buses for a number of reasons. So I just ask that if you could take that as a direction to work with your staff and with bylaw to see if there's something that we can do to resolve that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to set up a meeting between yourself and myself and Leanne Snedden, whose group would look after the zoning bylaw, and from a policy perspective, because I think if to get to where you need to go, what we would be required to do is amend the zoning bylaw to permit school buses to be parked in those villages, and there's a public consultation process associated with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it is a very sensitive issue. I understand people perhaps not liking to have a big yellow bus parked in their neighborhood, but I mean, it has happened for a number of years, and so I appreciate that. Look forward to working with you, and would report back to my colleagues as we move through this. So the next meeting, Mr. Moody, we've run into a little quirk, I guess, with the timing, because of the Christmas schedule and the delay of putting a meeting near the end of January, and then we would have another meeting within probably a week and a half or 2 weeks in February. So have you been able to resolve this, or should we leave this just to be announced date for our next meeting?
Mr. Chair, I think that we should be looking to our next regularly scheduled meeting, and there may be a requirement still to be determined for a special meeting to deal with one particular item. Okay. We're currently working with legal and the ward councillor to try to determine if that special meeting is required in order to bring forward a position to this committee for consideration. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to avoid that at this point, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to bring that item forward at a later date. But at this point in time, I regrettably, and I can tell by looking at the committee coordinator that he's a little frustrated with the ambiguity in this process to this point.
Mark never is frustrated. He never is frustrated.
But, Mr. Chair, at this point, regrettably, I don't have a clear and concise answer as to whether we will require a special meeting or not.
Okay. So thank you very much for that. And I know it's very difficult. There always are issues with this time of year with scheduling. And so we'll the next meeting to be determined, so it could be in January, it could be in February, but we'll wait for your wise and judicial insight.
But the regular meeting is February 6th.
Yeah, the regular meeting is February 6th, 2014. Jim? Okay, so with that, a motion to adjourn. Carried. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moody and your staff for that. Thank you, Laurel.